It's time, right? Hey, everybody. It's Chris. Hello. I forgot to cut down a sheet of 4x6, so I'm going to do that really quick. Actually, I'm going to cut 2 sheets of 4x6 just to be on the safe side in case I irreparably mess up one of them. So, I cut all of these by hand, which is why sometimes if you get commissions, they are a little bit narrower or a little bit wider, but they're all generally, I try to make sure they all fit in the 4x6 frame. So, hey, it's very good to see you. Hopefully you can hear me. Can everybody hear me? Open for a thing. So Liz is manning the drawing camera, and that will she'll also be seeing your comments and popping them up on the screen.
They can hear you.
Hey, that's great. Okay, so I know there's a little bit of a delay. Oh, and I need to fill my thing with water, so almost there. Okay. So usually when I am working on a commission or something, I do the pencils at my computer desk because that way I can bring up whatever reference image that I need and things like that, and then I'll do my painting over here. But because I'm doing this today, I went ahead and printed out a little picture of 90s Cyclops costume action figure because, you know, full body makes it real easy to see what's going on. So for anybody who doesn't know, I have a Patreon where I do commissions each month for backers of a certain tier level. And so one of my backers, Marissa, asked for a 90s Jim Lee era costume Cyclops. So I figured this is going to be my first one that I'm drawing this month. So I thought I might do it for y'all. So what I usually do to start with is I will work with a pencil. So I am, and you can get in as close as you want to the thing if you can, or around me. Okay, this is new. We're figuring this out. So I feel like since I draw over here, like over on this side is probably better, but like I think
send a shadow though. I'm not
yeah.
Sure. We'll try it.
Well, what if I do this instead? Is that better?
That's great.
Okay, here we go. All right, so now I'm going to start with the head. So I don't want to draw him necessarily shooting the beam because I feel like that kind of would make it harder to see what the face is. But I'll do this. Go ahead and start drawing the head in. Sometimes I'll do the whole body, but usually I'll do some details in there. In my mind, Cyclops' hair is reversed, like it's over on this side. So that's the way I'm going to draw it. I don't know if that's the actual swoop, but I'm going to try for it. So this era of the X-Men was when I, you know, and everybody else my age got really into them. The Fox cartoons started, I was in 6th grade, and we were all real excited, and we went and got all the cards and everything like that. And so I drew a lot of these folks when I was younger. And if anybody has any questions along the way about what I'm doing or comments or things like that, feel free to ask.
Cashman Chap says, I drew the same costume a few months ago, so I got super excited when I heard about this.
Oh, fun. So I'm going to do this sort of like, there's a arm thing I sometimes like when somebody's going to be, oh no, I forgot. Oh, there we go. I call it tantrum arms sometimes, which isn't necessarily what it is, but I think that it works well for somebody who's about to do a laser blast out of their eyes.
Cashman Chap asks, random question. Do you by any crazy chance have the ones you drew in 6th grade?
I doubt it. I have some that I drew in third grade, not of the X-Men, but of the Fantastic Four and a couple other people. But I don't think so. I have sort of a big gap of uh, basically if my parents saved it, I still have it, and if they didn't, then I don't. Um, so when I draw these shorts, I tend to defer to the actual shorts as opposed to the briefs. So I give them just a little bit of creep down the leg there. But we used one of the things that I loved about Jim Lee, and I think that a lot of people did, is that he had so many full body shots of his characters and different things that sort of looked like, promo art, and to that end, how great was it for the storytelling? I don't know. It's been a long time since I've read it, but as so far as being able to look at and reference the pieces, it was a real godsend for a kid, because you could open up just about any issue, especially that X-Men #1 that everybody had, and know exactly what each of the costumes looked like, which was not is not always it's easier in the age of Google image search, but
Chris, your mom is on here.
Hey mom.
She says the mother always gets blamed. Signed, the mother.
Oh no, she saved a lot of my stuff. I just don't know if she had any reason to save my middle school X-Men drawings. They weren't part of assignments or anything like that, but I do have a lot of comics that I made, and a lot of comics I've toiled for days on single pages, and that I made in like ninth grade and things like that, and she did save those, so thank you very much, Mom. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with how this one looks. So that's the pose, but I'm not completely happy with his what he looks like. So I know that Jim Lee Cyclops kind of has a sort of generically square hero face, but I feel like Cyclops, everybody calls him slim. Like I want him to have a longer face. So I'm going to lengthen that out a little bit. And I think that will, oh wait, this goes down here.
Eric says, my parents saved all my old artwork and I threw away like 90% of it.
There's a tricky thing with artwork, and the only person that I know who is, I think there are probably a few people, but one person who I know who is really open with his early stuff is Tony DiTerlizzi, who did the Spiderwick Chronicles. Like he'll post stuff that he did when he was like 17, 18, and there's like I'm very comfortable sharing stuff from when I was a kid, but sharing stuff from when I was a teen is almost always bad, because it's good enough to be really bad, if that makes sense. And so like teen stuff, I always cringe when I look at it, but it is what it is, and everybody has a starting point. So I'm going to put that down. I'm going to get out my pen, which I brought over. Here it is. So I built this desk back when I decided that I was going to work on Outlaw's Apprentice traditionally, and I wanted something at a really good angle for me. And it is a really good angle for me, but everything slides off. Like nothing will stay on, because it's a pretty steep angle, and it's non-adjustable. So I had to build this little platform for my watercolors to keep them level. So now I'll get in, and I tend to move in pretty close when I'm working on a piece, and also test my thing just to get started. So
Cashman Chap says, most of my art is Stickman. The probably past 6 months are actually good. And Eric says, is Liz going to stand there the whole time? She's the real MVP. Thank you.
Is. Poor Liz.
I am going to stand here the whole time because we didn't figure out another way to do this.
We figured this might be the best way. I know some people have like a rig, but I do not have a rig. So, okay, so now I'm going to take a red pen to do his goggles here. His visor.
Nick Forst says, I got to see Alex Ross's exhibit at the Norman Rockwell Museum. He had a ton of his childhood era drawings.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
I've never had a chance to get to the Rockwell Museum or the Brandywine Museum, and I really want to get to both. Or the American Illustrators thing. That is a good reminder because I know that Society of American Illustrators opens up their collection to people for New York when New York Comic Con rolls around or something. I've never taken advantage of that, and I need to this year, and I'm glad to have just thought of that because I would have forgotten. Okay, so now his nose. And now we got to do that. There we go. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with them so far. So now this over and start to do the little doohickeys here. This X. Another thing that I loved when I was a kid was all of the pouches. I wanted pouches on everything I owned. So my friends and I went to the Army Navy store and we got a lot of stuff and a lot of pouches and would attach them to everything because of this era of X-Men mostly. Also was a big trench coat fan thanks to Gambit and Highlander. I think I outgrew my trench coat phase by the time I was in like 7th grade or so. But man, 6th grade, I loved having a trench coat. I had one again when I was working and I was, wearing suits and dress coats and stuff to teach. And I had one for the rain, but it was less affectatious.
Eric says, I'm right now wondering if there is ever a comic where he uses any of the pouches on his Y-shaped chest belt.
We can only hope.
And lots of cheers for me holding the camera.
Yes, indeed. They are well deserved.
You guys, I'm blushing.
So I'll do a lot of these little lines for a couple of reasons. A lot of them are to denote form, like to give a sense as to where the fabric is moving, where the body is moving, stuff like that, like just a little hint to show like that torso. They also help with the watercoloring. They serve to break up the sections, and I can do this area of blue, and then this area of blue, and then this area of blue in a way that's sometimes harder when I just have one big open section to keep it uniform. I can keep it a lot uniform if I have these small digestible chunks. So that's both a there's an aesthetic reason and a logistical reason for them.
The pouches are for snacks. Nick says, I love the confidence you have with every stroke.
Well, thank you, Nick. A lot of that confidence comes from sketching in pen a lot. So I don't do it as much anymore. But when for the first, 5, probably closer to 10 years that I was seriously, like taking art seriously, trying to do comics, publishing comics, etc. I did all my sketchbook stuff in pen, and that sort of forced me to get more comfortable with being bold in my inking. Because also, if I sit too long on a line, the ink starts to bleed out. I give everybody what's that when your trouser press in the front there, just because it tends to delineate where the center of the leg is. It's sort of my version of that crossbar in the face that you draw when you're determining where a face is. I do the same thing with legs.
Terry asks, do you remember how old you were when you started drawing?
I always drew the same way that a lot of kids always drew. So it's kind of hard to not, I think pretty much always. Like I was always drawing something or another. When I started to get any sense that I was good at it, and the thing is, looking back at my drawings, like it's amazing how much approbation from other people can push you to do do stuff. You know, people telling you you're good at stuff. I look at those drawings from when I'm in, like, you know, second grade, fifth grade, whatever, and they're fine. They're no better than any fifth grader. You know, they're on the better side of average. But I had a lot of people. You know, my parents were incredibly supportive of me. I had teachers who were very supportive of me. It's just that I drew more than other people, and so I think is a big part of it. And so, but around like probably fifth grade, sixth grade is when I started to sort of have an identity as the drawer kid, like because I drew more than a lot of my classmates. I would enter drawings in contests, things like that. Um,
Can you talk about the pen that you're using?
yeah, so this pen is a Faber-Castell Pitt pen. So they come in a few different sizes, and I use a few different sizes. So these are Fs, and these are what I use for commissions. They're relatively small and tight. They're waterproof, which is great. I really like using those. When I'm working on pages for Outlaw's Apprentice, I work a little bit bigger. I use a size M. And the reason for that is that I am not as confident with the lettering working small. Like my handwriting isn't great. I can make it look okay lettering wise, but I have to work pretty big in order to do so. So I work at a bigger scale than I traditionally use, so that I can letter bigger, and then I just use a bigger pen weight in order to accommodate that. But this is great. So it's waterproof. It can also erase. So after I'm done with the inking, I'll go in. I'll make sure I wait a second, because if you do this like immediately after you ink, it will spread it. But if you wait, 10 seconds, you're fine.
So when you say it can erase, you mean you can erase over
Sorry,
it?
I can erase over it. So I can erase the pencil line and leave that ink line there. And this is a brand new size F, I think. And so the line is a little bolder than it sometimes is. They tend to start to fine up as you, I guess, sharpen the tip through use. So when you're first using them, they're a little bit thicker lines, barely perceptible. The more you use them, they become a little bit thinner. So I will then, after this is done, I'll go in and start adding some black areas. Actually, I need to do just a little bit more erasing.
And you're coming in with another Faber-Castell.
And I'm coming in with another Faber-Castell. This is the size F, or excuse me, this is the size B. This is a brush tip pen. So when these start to get dull, you can use your fingers or a pair of needle nose pliers, pull them out. It's the same on both sides, stick them back in. As long as you have ink, it's good. If anybody at the Faber-Castell Pitt pen factory can get a hold of a big old bag of these, I'll make it worth your while. So then I'll go in and sort of chunk in where my shadows are going to go, or if not necessarily shadows, these spot black areas. And still another section. Usually I'm better at erasing, but there we go. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. And now I will move to the painting part. So I've got my paintbrush, got my little, I use film containers for my water. I used to use pill containers. I can't use cups, because if I use cups, I will drink from the cups and drink a lot of bad for you paint stuff. So this is a helpful way for me to go about stuff. So a lot of times I will start with whatever my flesh tone is. So in the case of Cyclops, it's this peach. So this is a Van Gogh Naples yellow. or Naples yellow red, something like that. So I'll go in. Oh, it's got this upper part here. And then I'll dab that, because if I don't, it'll still keep the color, but when it dries, it'll dry over the black line, and you don't want that, or I don't want that. So now that's pretty good. I'm going to give them a hint of red on the nose and cheeks there. Dab that a little bit less. And then I will start in on the, I'm not gonna do the visor first. I'm gonna do the yellow of the body first, because that'll affect how I do the visor. Like, I don't want the visor to be too, I want it to feel metallic, whereas I want this to feel like cloth. So that's gonna affect things just a little bit. So switch over here. And Liz, if you want to get the paint mixing, I think sometimes people, I'm about done this time, but I think sometimes people like seeing what I'm mixing there. So I'm grabbing a little bit of this one. I think this might be a gouache. Oh no, I do think it's a watercolor. I've got a few gouaches for some of my pieces in there. Same thing.
Cashman Chap says, I've done a handful of X-Men drawings. None of them are like 10 out of 10, but they're okay.
Well, that's great. Who's your favorite to draw?
Probably Cyclops. He's done the most of him.
All right. Well,
Looking good.
So a lot of my paint palette is thinking, what colors am I more likely to use than others? So I'm constantly revising it, like every year or so. I'll go through and change it, but it's on the whole, I try to do as little mixing as I have to, just because it's hard to keep stuff uniform. Now, sometimes if I'm using like muted tones, grays, greens, browns, like I'll do a lot of mixing for those. But for the flat colors, yellows, blues, reds, like I love having versions of those that I like and that I can use frequently. Yellow, more than any other color, tends to cover up the ink line. Like when it dries, like it tends to obscure it a little bit and make it look a little more gray. So I try to be careful when I'm doing yellow to avoid going directly on top of those lines or going on too heavy and too thick. So almost done with this part.
Question, do you have any other characters for other videos or streams planned right now?
I need to do one. So I've got, I know folks who are in Europe, especially, who are rarely able to do these, what for them are middle of the night live sessions. And so I need to do something sort of middle of the day. And I've got some other Patreon things that are there. So I've got one of my patrons, Michael, wants an Anne Bonny, and I love drawing pirate stuff, so I might do Anne Bonny for my next one, which I have not talked to Liz yet as to which day is going to be best to do that midday, so we'll have to plan that out. Again, thank you, darling, for holding that phone. I know it's not the easiest.
You're welcome. You will probably also have some domestic friends join us in the middle of the day, homeschool friends, perhaps.
I thought, hey, fun. I thought you were going to say you were going to have some domestic additional chores as a result of like for
Oh,
payback for
you
this.
may. You may.
All right. Okay, so that part is done. I forgot his briefs were the same color. All right, so now I'm going to add in that blue. It's a really vibrant blue. I think I'm going to be using this blue, which I almost never use. It has a tendency to almost want to skew green, and I forget what this is. It might be a Prussian. So I rarely use this. I usually use indigo, sky, and cerulean. So not cerulean, cerulean.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, uh, but um, but this one is very much 90s X-Men blue. So I'm gonna roll with that. This might be too dark going on. No, it's fine. Okay. So you can see what I mean about using those little spaces to choose where I'm laying down that color. And I'm leaving just a little bit of white there, even though I'm going to be going over this with a shadow coat. Sometimes that just helps things to pop a little bit. And I won't do that everywhere, like I wouldn't do that on this neck collarbone, because that's not actually a pop thing. That's just sort of a suggesting to the viewer where those parts intersect. Whereas down here, it's actually a physical thing. So this is like, I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but like these are real lines, these are imaginary lines that help you to define the form, if that makes sense. So my coloring is different depending on if things are real lines or just lines that help to guide your audience to what you want them to think. And that's not something I've ever thought about out loud before or articulated, but I think it's true. One thing that I'm really glad of is I've gotten out of the habit, and it was a tough habit to break, of constantly shaping the tip of the brush with my mouth, which is probably not healthy. And I think that a number of, I mean, granted, paints used to be a lot more toxic, but still, cadmium red is probably not good for you. So another thing that's kind of tricky is when I'm working back and forth between multiple things, like I will like put a paintbrush in my mouth, the end of a paintbrush in my mouth, and use this, or I put a pen in my mouth. It becomes my sort of pocket while I'm working. And I found that when I do shows lately, if I'm drawing at shows and I have a mask on, I'm constantly like just poking myself in the face because I'm so habituated to doing that. So, yeah. That one's on real thick, so I need to spread that out real fast before it sets in. So I use cardstock instead of Bristol or watercolor paper because it dries really fast to it. Like I can't move that paint at this point. But I got it, so it's good. But that's because I'm impatient. I don't like to wait for the paint to settle. Some people like that ability to move things around. Like I want to treat it like a marker that is faster than a marker because I can do bigger chunks. And more organic blending if I have like muddy characters and stuff. So Cyclops is a little out of my comfort zone because you can't really make Cyclops muddy and still have him look like Cyclops. He's a clean fellow.
We've got some smiley faces, a gorgeous, and it comes out perfectly. Cashman
All right.
says, with my favorite Cyclops picture, I accidentally made his arms like tree trunks. They're like giants.
I saw that. That's the one that made me chuckle. All right, so I'm pretty happy with that. Now I just have to throw in the brown hair and the visor. So I'm gonna, for the brown, I'm gonna mix these two over here.
Come on.
And I've got a hair in there. Sometimes I leave. The downside with watercolor stuff is it's real easy for sort of dust and hairs and things like that that are just floating to the air to stick and settle to them, and then eventually they'll get on your brush. So I've got a brown that I mix myself. It's a mix of indigo and no, wait, that's great. This brown is a mix of red and green. I have yet to find a brown that I'm really happy with, so I mix my own brown. And that looks pretty good, but I'm going to add a little bit of this sienna. I think that looks just about right for old Cyclops here. Okay, and now I will do my last bit of base coloring, which is to do the visor. So for the visor, I'm going to do a little bit of a desaturated yellow. It's not the same hue exactly. I mixed in a little bit of green and a little bit of gray there, just junk that was on my palette. And I'm pretty happy with that. And so now I am going to I want to do something with it. So I'm going to make it kind of like a reddish halo for him here. And actually, although I started putting it on this brush, I'm going to switch to a bigger brush because I want to do that. So usually I use a size 0. This is a size 5. And these are all sort of cheapy. I used to have nicer brushes because I did a demo for the Escoda rep, and he gave me a whole lot of brushes as a thanks, and I used those for a long time, and now I just use $5 synthetic brushes, and they work just as well for me. So let's sort of do that around there and turn that, let those kind of drift upwards. Okay, so I'm happy with that. And now I'm going to go in and do the last thing that I do with this, which is to add a shadow layer. And so the way I do a shadow layer, I actually have mixed up my own shadow here. And it is a mix of indigo and purple with a little bit more indigo than purple. This is something that I learned from watching Matt Kent work on some of his commissions. Is he would do these sort of base colors, and then he would go in and add the shadow layer. And I was habitually, like anytime I was doing watercolor or digital color or anything like this, up until that point, I hand picked every shadow color. So like if I had like my face here, like this part's like sort of reddish pink and this part's sort of brown, like I would pick that brown instead of doing what most colorists in comics do, which is just to put a shadow layer over everything and but I didn't know how to do it at the time. Anyway, I do that now when I'm doing watercolor, and I mostly do it pretty sparsely. Every once in a while I'll go pretty heavy on it, but Cyclops isn't a particularly shadowy character, so I'm not gonna overdo it with him. So that's a little more, oh, that still has the red in it. And you know what? Let me pop up for a second. Every once in a while, I need to clean the top of this palette, so I don't want to gunk up my watercolor handkerchief because I forget to wash it for long stretches at a time, and so it needs to stay as good as I can. But I'll use just a paper towel and clear that off because I do want this to be mostly just that shadow without other stuff in it. Because if I get that other stuff, yellow is really tricky. If you start to mix stuff with the yellow, it starts to get troublesome. So another thing that's important with this one is that because I've got that yellow in there, I need to add a little more purple to the shadow hue that I'm going to be using, because if I do that blue, if it's indigo heavy, when I put it over these yellow parts, it's going to, of course, turn a little bit more green, which I don't want. I got asked if this is a Pez machine. Yes, it's a little Halloween pumpkin Pez machine. I don't have any Pez in it, but it's real cute. So I'm going to see what my shadow, my already mixed shadow looks like. And actually, that is pretty purple. Because I mix them myself, they are unevenly mixed throughout as it dries. So some sections are more blue. As I dig a little deeper, it might get more purple. As I dig a little deeper, it might get blue again. So this is just about right. I would usually add more blue to this, but this purple will work better with Cyclops. So I'm gonna mix that, make it real light, and then decide which side is gonna be.
Chris says this is wonderful. Thanks for doing
this. It's my pleasure. Now this is kind of tricky because my table is at such an angle that this stuff really wants to move. So I've got to constantly spin it so it doesn't pool up. Usually I would let it pool up if I was doing it at a convention or something like that. Now I got to remember which side it's on. It's the downside of spinning.
Get in your way.
Oh no, you're not in my way at all, dear. And I'm also going to use this paper towel to suck a little bit of that excess up there because there's a lot. I'm not going to dab it, but I am going to make it less punchy. Oh, I do need to reach over here. Sorry.
Is that okay?
That's what you meant. Oh, the white SUV is coming by. We've got one truck in the neighborhood, which comes by with the bass going very, very loud pretty frequently. Again, we always know which one it is. Okay, no, lift that up there. And his chin is darker than the rest of his skin, so I'm going to have to go up and add a little bit more soon.
John says, looks great. Would love to see you do one of these where you scan the line art and color digitally.
I'd be happy to. A lot of time, I most of the time, if I'm coloring digitally, if I know I'm going to be coloring digitally, I'll do the line art digitally. Although not always. And I am, like I did some stuff recently where I thought I was going to be doing it traditionally, and then I ended up doing it digitally. So, but yeah, I could absolutely do that. Okay. I think I want to add a little bit more there. Now it's just doing a little bit of tweaking here and there. I want that visor to pop. There we go. Okay. And that's it. That's my Cyclops. So I'm going to go ahead and sign that. And we're good. So thank you guys so very much for coming while I did the sketch. If anybody has any other questions before we go, I'm happy to answer them.
Seafood Kodiak says, spot on.
Hey, Craig. It's good to, I assume that's Craig. If it's not, then, oh, yeah, I think it is. So, well, thank you very, very much. Thank you all for joining me this evening. I will, to give you all a couple of heads up, if you are local, I will be in Evansville, Indiana this upcoming weekend doing a talk with Nate Powell, who you may know from the March books, among many other projects. That's at 2:30 at the Evansville Museum of a bunch of things, history, art, something else. And that's part of their comic program that they have going on this weekend. And then the weekend after that, this upcoming week, a week from this weekend, I will be at Dragon Con. So I'll have a table there. If you're at Dragon Con, I hope you'll come by. Thank you all again for coming by and for letting me steal you away for the evening. And I hope everybody has a great evening.